hear what your guest has to say about it.
Okay, Steve. All right, Dan. So now I know what to ask you. I'm making you the presenter. Welcome back to F.A.C.E, Dan Popescu, one of my sources for intelligence gathering in the gold and silver markets. Dan, you just activate your mic, and then there's a screen share function. Same as last time, and really appreciate your return to our community.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Can hear you, Dan. I can hear you clearly, Dan. How are you?
Fine, fine. I'm very busy with Brexit and with Donald Trump keeps us very, very busy.
Yeah, you know, but considering all that you just mentioned, gold has been in a sideways trading range for about 3 weeks now. You know, I'm very interested to start off with a question my colleague Steve Borghi asked is, what do you think of two big majors merging, you know, Newmont taking over Barrick? What do you think it's a sign of? Is it a bullish sign for the industry, or is it just because, you know, it's not like they gobbled up juniors, you know what I mean, Dan? They went for, you know, they swallowed a whale. So what do you think is the rationale behind that when it comes to gold?
Well, it's I'm not so sure. It's I'm becoming very skeptical of all those M&A, Wall Street, MBA mergers and acquisitions that have been done in the last 30 years. The fashion started in the 90s, and I would say that about 80% of the mergers and acquisitions recommended by MBA models have been a disaster. And they merge, and then a few years later they demerge, and then some new president comes and remerges. I'm not so sure they know exactly what they are doing, and very often don't know their industry. When it comes to Randgold, the president of Randgold is an excellent mining specialist engineer. So I put my money behind people like that who know their McEwen, who used to be at Gold Corp, which is part of the Newmont merger.
Now it's Mux, right?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I'm not so sure that I think there is trouble in the mining industry because the price of gold has not been going up, and the costs of producing and finding gold, it's becoming very difficult, very expensive. They are lucky right now because the price of oil, which is a great, very important ingredient, has dropped, contrary to the early 2000s when the price of gold started going up. Also the price of oil and inputs, so it cut in some of the profits of those stocks. And I don't think that in the 1960s, because the price of gold was fixed, the price of stocks, of gold stocks, were an indicator of the future. They were you could trade them, you couldn't do it with gold. And they indicated that something is going to break, so you had they were a leading indicator.
And so you're saying that correlation is broken now.
Exactly. Now it's the opposite. I think that it's gold that's going to be the leading indicator, and you're going to see silver follow, and also stocks exploding. I think that the mining companies, gold mining companies, have lost. They've been so much in this sideline and bear market that they are not ready to take action before they see the price really breaking up. So I don't know
about production levels.
Sorry to interrupt, Dan. So you agree with what I said, that at some point when we see a squeeze in the gold price, that means that the industry is not going to be ready to catch up with capacity increase, which means that probably that's going to be fuel for a bigger rally until they can start investing once again and matching up demand with supply, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But there is another point that you should not ignore when you speak about gold, and that is the above ground amount of gold and the monetary role of gold, which can completely disturb the supply, the mining supply, and the industrial demand for silver especially. People in the industry, analysts, are always confused with the price of silver. Why doesn't the price of silver follow supply and demand? Because 50–60% of the demand is industrial. It's because in a monetary period, a monetary crisis, silver forgets and doesn't act anymore as an industrial metal. It acts as a monetary metal, as the poor man's gold, and starts to follow gold, but on steroids. Okay.
Yeah. Well, have you noticed, Dan? Steve and I monitor the gold-silver ratio, and we saw a peak a few months ago, and it continues to decline. I remember the old reversion to the mean, and gold-silver ratio was more like 40-1. Then what it got up to was twice that amount. So you think eventually silver is going to, in the later stages, the more speculative phase of this, silver will be the one on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, I wouldn't be surprised to see. I've written it on Twitter on a regular basis.
$100 silver.
A higher ratio of gold to silver, going close to 100 before it reverses.
Okay. So you don't think we've had that turn yet? Okay.
No,
from a technical perspective, 80 is a very, very key technical level in the gold-silver ratio. So I would agree with Dan in what sense? As long as we remain above 80, the path of least resistance remains to be higher. But in my opinion, if we break below 80, that's going to be a major technical event in the ratio.
I'll tell you, at the beginning of the show, I showed a couple of silver shares that are, the main ones people trade unless you really have a big knowledge, like First Majestic and Hecla and Coeur d'Alene, and they all put in very bad days yesterday. They look like they're headed to new lows.
Might be the case.
So Dan, something else I wanted to ask you about that I learned from somebody else. I don't have an original thought in my head. I just learned from everybody. And I want to talk to you about, because I know you keep an eye on it, the yuan gold peg or relationship. Why does it seem to be that when the yuan is strengthening, gold goes up, and when the yuan is weakening, gold goes down?
We have to be very careful with correlations. Markets are complex systems, and we have a tendency for simplicity because computers are linear and can only look in a XY relationship. But the markets are much more complex than that, and there is a discussion about a correlation between gold and the yuan. I've been following it closely lately. You can't miss it. It's there. I don't know if people can see my
we can
my chart. I have now the gold in US dollars and the yuan in US dollars, and even if it's not a perfect correlation, it's still a very close correlation, and I'm not going to make too much out of it, but there is something that is you cannot dismiss the fact that China is accumulating an incredible amount of gold. They've started in 2000, and if you know the Chinese mind, they have a very long-term perspective. They don't do things in 6 months like Americans. Europeans have a more 20-year perspective. The Chinese have a 100-year perspective.
Yeah.
So they started in 2000 to create a strategy in which they decided to integrate gold in their geopolitical and also monetary strategy. It's just you have to be blind not to see it. They are very secretive, so you have to watch their actions rather than what they say. But the fact, I lived in a communist country, in the communist system, and they did not allow people to hold gold. It was something that went against the state, but the state did hold gold, and the Russians, the Soviet Union, was trading gold through a bank in London and then in Zurich in the 1960s. So they have a strategy, a strong strategy. And what's fascinating and different between Russia and China is that Russia has not yet facilitated the buying of gold by citizens. They still tax gold buying and selling. China completely pushed and facilitated by opening stores intentionally. It's the government decision to facilitate private individuals to buy gold, public institutions. So not just the central bank.
That's pretty democratic. What do you think is behind that liberal policy in China? They don't want their citizens to end up kind of like what happened to countries like citizens in Venezuela that had currency crises. They want people to kind of go along with what their program is?
I think this is a speculation from me, but I think that one of their strategies, because from an totalitarian regime, as I said, it's not in their tradition to let citizens hold gold or cash. And that puzzled me at the beginning. Why does the Chinese government, contrary to the Russian government, encourages, not just allow it, because they're
marketing it to their public.
Exactly. And my theory, this is my hypothesis, is that first of all, it was a way to keep citizens in authoritarian countries and in hyperinflation countries. What people do, they go into foreign currencies. They did it in Germany with in the 1930s. They did it in Russia in the 90s. They did it in Brazil, Argentina.
I know where you're going. This way, it makes them avoid going to the dollar.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's part of their de-dollarization program for their whole population. I that's interesting, Dan. I tell you, every time I talk to you, Dan, I learn new things about the economy and gold and what's happening globally. Why don't we get to, because I've been to your blog and your website, and you post all your interviews there, and I know that you have your finger on the pulse of not just monetary matters, but what's happening politically, geopolitically. I've asked this question before. Does this time frame that we're in with our current president remind you at all of what was happening market-wise during the Nixon years?
Yes, very much. Very much.
And in what ways?
What happened with Nixon in 1971, actually it started in 1965, 61 to 68, they created the gold, London gold pool. And that was the reason, is that people were running out of the dollar, and the Vietnam War and deficits exploded that, with the French president de Gaulle exchanging the US dollars into gold. And when the British came, Nixon decided that's enough and shut the door. And we've been since 1971 in a kind of no man's chaotic, if you want, current multi-fiat currency system. It was chaotic in the sense that people have short memory. I'm old enough to remember, because some people talk about the euro, the period before the euro, and they forget during that the period before the euro, the currencies in Europe and in the United States, it was chaos. The fluctuations, they created all kinds of governments were getting together. That's how they created the G2 between Giscard d'Estaing and I think it was Gerald Ford. And that was because the system was so chaotic. Currencies were depreciating. The Deutschmark was going up. They had that serpent, which was supposed to be a band of 1% movement. It never worked. They were meeting every year and expanding the band from 1% to 1.5 to 2% to 5% to 10% until it broke up. And that's when they came with the idea of creating the euro, because it just didn't make sense anymore. And we're having the same situation now, but at a global level. With the dollar, with the yuan, it's chaos in the currency sector. So it does, you're right, it resembles it's unfinished business. It was supposed, for those who do not know, that when in 1971, when Bretton Woods collapsed, they created, in 1969, they created the SDR, special drawing rights. Not people know that the first version of the SDR was almost 1 gram of gold, equivalent to $35.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So
not 1 ounce, 1 gram. What a difference. Remember when it was 1 ounce? FDR days.
1 ounce of gold was $35.
Yeah.
And the SDR was calculated to be the equivalent 35 SDRs, the same as the dollar. So they created in a way, for a very short period of time, a pure gold standard where that SDR unit was almost 1 gram of gold, 0.89, I think, grams of gold. So they returned to a gold standard, but United States was absolutely against it. And I have papers by the State Department and the Treasury Department. They are saying that we shouldn't let the price of gold go up, because it goes on against our strategy of replacing gold with the SDR paper basket rather than gold. So you are absolutely right. It's a continuation of the crisis. In historical terms, think about it. 40 years.
40 years later. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, we're talking 40 years here. So then that brings us to the SDR. You expecting some type of major realignment, with the dollar having even less importance in the SDR, should they decide to reorganize it? I've heard things like countries are going to be a percentage of it based upon their debt to GDP ratios. Is that what you're hearing?
There are different versions of the SDR that are being discussed. There is a Chinese economist who came out with the idea of a p-gold, paper gold, linked not to national currencies, but linked to a value, calculated value of global GDP, that it will go up with the global GDP and down with the global GDP. Now you see the problem here, that who defines what's GDP? We have problems with the GDP already. So I don't give it,
especially in opaque economies like China.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to work. The present SDR, which is based on paper currencies, doesn't solve the problem. It just pushes the problem in the future, because it's just a basket of the problems. Okay, it's the US dollar, the euro, the British pound, the Japanese yen, and the Chinese yuan now. In 1973, they created, it was about 18 or 19 currencies. It's completely absurd. Okay.
Okay.
And
So, instead of me asking you and having answers about not what's going to happen, that's not going to happen, with some of the time we have left, why don't you paint us your scenario for gold and how domestic and geopolitical and monetary factors play into that scenario. I know the expression "don't wait to buy gold and wait." Are we in that mode now? What are you looking at for 2019 in gold for major events, Dan?
For gold, first of all, gold has already broken up that downtrend that started in 2016.
Okay.
It has broken, and if you can see right now my chart of the SDR, which is a basket of the most important currencies in the world.
Right.
So in that basket of currency, it has already broken to the upside in a very decisive fashion. But there are two currencies that are not yet doing that, and I'm putting now the chart of the euro, gold price in euro. It is very close to breaking above that downtrend, just like the SDR. And you can see it's coming close to breaking above the trend, the long trend line in the up fashion. And I think it's gonna happen sometime this year. That is, I'm quite sure it's gonna happen. That is, once it breaks the euro, I think it will break also in the dollar. And if it breaks under the dollar and also the 1300 level, the 1320 is the most it's the most important.
That was 2011 high in euro gold when gold was in dollar terms was 1900.
Yeah, and it has to break that above that 13, I would say, 1,300.
Okay. Up around the
to,
previous highs in that red channel line you have up there.
Yeah.
So that's a pearl. So gold traders don't only look at what's happening in dollar terms. Dan's saying the key currency against gold to watch right now is euro. So put that on your radar.
Yeah, the euro will be it seems to be, if you look on the technicals only, that gold will break first on the euro, and then it will break under the dollar. And under the dollar, what's interesting is that it is coming very close to it's also the crossing what's called the gold cross.
Oh, the golden cross.
Yeah, the golden cross, which is the 50
and 200
and 200 moving averages. I'm putting now. You have the chart over here.
I'd love to buy it there at 1250. It's a beautiful chart. Yeah.
If you see my chart over here. Oh, wait a minute. Right now, that the moment that we're talking right now, I see that the 50-day moving average has crossed the 200-day moving average.
We're making history here.
Right now, yeah. As you can see.
Everything's timing, Dan. So, all right. So we're looking at a golden cross. Tell me.
Just happened this morning.
Okay, well, I knew this when I booked this 2 months ago. This was going to happen. That's a Nostradamus in me. But Dan, what do you think? Could there be a constitutional crisis after Mueller's report? And that be, I'm thinking of things that could dethrone the dollar. Could it be a confidence crisis with the administration and constitutional crisis? Could it be that Congress is less pro-Saudi? And the dollar the petrodollar is a very important part of dollar demand, and the Chinese there too are also trying to cut into it by having their own oil exchange. Or could it be? I've even heard talk of Trump is pretty hawkish with Iran and lately with Venezuela. Could that be it? I also heard that he's made a lot of comments about the carnage of violence in certain cities in the U.S., like Chicago, where he might bring in the feds, which in another term is called martial law. What do you think is going to be some of the geo events that we'll be paying attention to this year?
Yeah, this is the year where we might have some kind of a reset of the international monetary system. We've been waiting for it. It's in the cards. The thing is that because of Donald Trump, he doesn't believe in international organizations or coordinations right. between he's what they call right. it globalist. I don't like the word globalist, but he doesn't believe in a coordinated fashion of consensus. He believes in a kind of American bullying exceptionalist. This is the American way. Shut up and follow me, or I'll shoot you down. This is the way.
You've seen this leadership before.
Yeah, Connolly expressed it during Nixon, the Treasury Secretary, when he said, "The dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. Deal with it. I don't give a damn. I do what I want." Okay. Trump has the same attitude, and that is dangerous because if the system collapses, goes into a crisis, there is not going to be, like in 2008, any coordination with the other central banks.
No friends. In fact, people rooting for the king to take a fall.
Yeah,
King dollar.
And that's a big problem because in chaos you don't know what the results will come out, and this is the way it's coming out right now. Donald Trump has a trade war with China, a Cold War with China and Russia, and recently he's starting giving signals of wanting to start a real war, not military war, but a Cold War with Europe. So that puts 3-4 of the biggest majors, because he's also has insulted the Prime Minister of India recently in the last 2 weeks on a constant basis. So he's starting a war with the European Union, with India, with China, and with Russia. Now, I don't think United States is that great to take all of them together. So that is a danger. And the Russians and the Chinese and the Europeans are working on an alternative to the dollar. It's not there, and people look and say, it's just talk. It's not talk, but the European and the Russians, keep in mind, Dale, the Russians and the Chinese today in their central banks have some of the most sophisticated analysts and graduates from American universities, from European universities, and from their own. And they are not the old Soviet style of idiotic, indoctrinated Marxists. So they don't reply to any attack from Donald Trump in purely psychological, I have to do something to react. They think, they prepare themselves. I don't know if you see my Excel chart right now, is the Russia official Forex reserves.
Yeah.
The latest one, look at there. The US dollar now represents only 20% of the Russian foreign exchange reserves. Europe represents 32%, the yuan 14%, and gold represents now 18% of their international reserves. And the Chinese are hiding their reserves, so they are preparing something. And Putin, the BRICS meeting in, I think it was September, in the fall, I think, hinted and said that we're working on something. And you're seeing right now, all over the world, agreements to do trade contracts in local currencies. So it's taking away from the supremacy of the dollar. It is not spontaneous, but like in 1971, it started in 1965. It took a few years, but I remember because I was in Europe and I couldn't exchange my US dollar travel checks during the crisis. It was so bad. So
wow. Yeah.
It
okay,
is.
so you know things take time. Seems like they're happening in slow motion, and then you hit a tipping point, and then everything happens all at once.
Yeah, it's Hemingway's when he was asked how you went bankrupt, and he said first slowly and then suddenly.
Yeah, Dan, it's always such a pleasure to have you. I learned so much from you. You're a great historian, and you give us, you know, we all get caught up in, you know, watching Fox News, CNN, even BBC, whatever, and really appreciate you bringing your telescope and giving us some ideas about what's going on outside of the U.S. and, you know, key things to watch like Euro against gold, and really appreciate what you do in educating the people on Twitter and everywhere else about the value of gold, that it's not an archaic relic and not a paperweight, even though at times price does not always go up, but over time can serve everyone well. So thank you, Dan. I hope that your followers and subscribers mushroom in 2019 for you.
Thank you very much, Dale. Same for you. All the best and good health to everybody.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Gold can't buy health, but it can preserve your financial health. Ask people in countries. Let me just wrap it up with this. I just have to ask you, Dan.
Yes.
Do you think that crypto will ever be competition for precious metals?
I have to be careful what you mean by crypto.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin specifically, no. Bitcoin has incredible flaws in its design that makes it the misconception that the less Bitcoin exists, the more it's valued and the more it will circulate. And we are seeing it that since 2011, the circulation of Bitcoin has been going down, and stores, businesses that used to accept it have been dropping. It's because it has no marketability and liquidity. Okay. So no, I don't think Bitcoin, but you could have crypto currencies backed by gold. There are already many of those versions that will survive and that will drive. Central banks are looking into it. The Fed is looking into it. The Bank of England is looking into it. The Bank of Russia, and that is to make their currency easily transferable through computers. But it will still be back. The Bank of Russia is working on something, but it's not linked to Bitcoin. It's linked to the ruble or maybe to gold, okay. But it's not Bitcoin.
I heard
itself.
that something can't be a cryptocurrency by the pure definition if it's centralized. It's got to be decentralized. So if governments are doing it.
No, Dale, this is a misunderstanding of the definition of the word crypto and the word fiat and the word digital. All the currencies, fiat currencies today are digital. Right. Bitcoin is no different, and it's no better when it comes to electronics. Since the 1980s, we have been using, you're old enough, Dale, to know that you've been using digital dollars for at least 40 years. So Bitcoiners, when they say that the dollar is paper relic of the past, yeah. It's not true. We are already in digital world, and 80%, I would say, I'm not sure the precise number, but 80% of the dollars and the euro circulating are not physical. They're not paper, they are digital. So digital is anything that circulates electronically. Now, crypto means that it is digitally but encrypted in such a way that you cannot duplicate it or you cannot falsify it. Okay? Crypto it's an abbreviation of cryptology. Cryptology is an art that is more than 5,000 years old. Bitcoin did not invent it. Satoshi did not invent it. It is the art of crypting information in such a way that it cannot be stolen. Okay?
Who was it? The Egyptians?
We've tried since the beginning of humanity. We've tried to hide information from the enemy. Okay? With cryptic messages. Okay?
Right.
So so you have a Bitcoin is a crypto digital currency, if you want. Okay?
Okay.
The dollar is also a digital. People don't realize that your paper dollar today is a cryptic dollar, because if you look on the piece of plastic, because it's not paper anymore, it has all kinds of cryptic design, so you cannot copy it. Okay?
Interesting.
So the paper dollar is also cryptic. Okay? So Bitcoin is a digital cryptic currency. Okay, but the dollar is also digital, and what the Bank of Russia is trying to do is to do a ruble cryptic, and also the Bank of Iran. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
The only thing is,
I could talk to you for hours.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dan, very interesting. So my definition of what makes something crypto is was not true, that a centralized government could have their own cryptocurrency.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Yeah,
so,
my projections, I'll put it very fast for you. Sorry to.
No, you don't. It's okay.
Okay, I'm gonna put my chart, and I stand by that. Technically, I haven't seen any change yet. It is the burst of a bubble that started at 19,000. We are now, as you can see it, you don't need too much mathematics to see that this looks like a correction, some kind of a triangle pattern that will take, the target was 1,000 when it broke under the 6,000 support here.
Right.
So the target is 1,000, and up to now, I haven't seen any indicator or anything that makes me change from the fundamental.
It would have to get back above 6,000 to change the picture.
Yes, 6,000 will change and will make me change the picture.
Okay. All right. What a great look. So I'm going to wait a little while before I get a, to me, these wallets for crypto, I don't even know what they look like. Are they leather? I'm just kidding. But it looks like we have time to accumulate crypto. And what an interesting conversation today with you, Dan. I really appreciate it, and glad it's on video for people to listen to at their leisure. So good hunting, my brother.
Okay, have a nice day.
Thank you, Dan. Everyone, Dan Popescu, and you can follow him on Twitter at Dan Popescu CO, and then go to his blog, and he's got great video content covering everything, global hotspots, what we talked about today. Make Dan Popescu part of your intelligence gathering in the precious metal, shiny stuff market, because you're going to learn from him, as I do every time I interview him. So thanks again, Dan, and let's get back together in a few months. And everyone, that's a wrap for us here on Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good hunting. And remember, don't just count your pips, count your blessings. I'll see everyone tomorrow. Thank you, Dan.
Pleasure. Bye, Dale.
Bye-bye.
Bye.